Good afternoon, welcome back to my channel. Back to the traditional crazy pursuit of coming up with short stories based on random words. Today's random words are as follows. And this little tale, which is quite strange, is tale number 121, and it's called Angel's Drop. You know you're close to Angel's Drop when you hear the shrieking of the gulls as they fight for the entrails liberally strewn across the tumultuous tide of Traitor's Bay. The elite parade captives along the shoreline so they can get a good view of their ultimate fate. The path, thronged with jeering, spitting, rotten fruit hurling natives, leads to a flight of 300 narrow, slippery steps cut into the rock of Castle Mount. At the top, the pulpit, as it's known, a protuberance of granite hanging 300 feet above the frothing breakers, bears witness to the last moments of the unfortunates whose sham trials have resulted inevitably in their condemnation. I look up, ignoring the spittle and vegetable slime dripping down my face, my red locks flowing freely, and I see one thin elderly man, his hands manacled in time-honoured fashion behind his back, being prodded with long flaming brands towards the end of the pulpit, where inevitably he's forced to leap to his death. I turn away as he plunges, hearing only screams and jeers. Nobody survives the fall, even those fortunate enough to drop feet first into the waves, since jagged rocks lie just under the surface in many places. Without free hands to swim and wrought iron chains dragging them down, survivors of the drop have little chance of making it to the shore. Even if they do, they'll meet only a volley of arrows from the elite guard. That will be me in 10 days' time, unless a miracle befalls me. One thing's for sure, it won't be the miracle that's supposedly the only way to evade this brutal death. It is said that those who are true angels, and not their red-headed human-born pretenders, will step from the pulpit and be forced to reveal themselves in their true form, ascending safely to heaven. After over 1,000 angel leaps, no true angels have been witnessed in the ascendant. In truth, the elite can't really believe this absurdity. They merely use it as a scriptural cover for a cruelty they are eager to enact. A guard pushes back an unruly gaggle at the foot of the steps, and I begin to climb, desperately trying to think of a plan of escape. My arms, manacled behind me at the elbow and wrist, cannot be forced forward over my head or pulled under my buttocks. My feet, chained 8 inches apart, won't allow for a speedy escape, even if I could break free now. By the time I've exhausted every plan, no matter how improbable, I'm already at the gates of the prison. An ancient rusty portcullis is raised, and I'm led barefoot down floors of stone, polished smooth by the feet of countless enemies of the elite. How our rulers came to fear and loathe red-haired people is lost in time, and since nothing now is ever written down, only fragments of oral history survive to carry the truth. In Scripture it's said that the angels, harbingers of the final ascendancy, are to be recognized by their vivid red locks. In a land of brown-skinned, black-haired people, pale creatures like myself are rare indeed. While we may look spectral, it is my belief that we are somehow a throwback to an age when our pigmentation was more common. When I was born, it is said my mother screamed when she saw my pale red-yellow curls. I was given to a hermit who took me deep into the woods, coloured my hair with charcoal daily, and raised me, not unkindly, as the son he'd never had. My downfall was my own fault, really. I fell in love with a blue-eyed girl who seemed the very soul of trustworthiness. Eventually I let her see my natural colouring in a waterfall in the forest when we were making love. Like my mother, she screamed and ran when she saw the sign of the pretender. Unlike my mother, she contacted the authorities. I'm led into a dark chamber lit only by the dull embers of a hearth over which is positioned various hooks, spits and grills. A dull-eyed man, cruel of expression and dressed in a billowing white smock stained with grease, sneers as I'm brought in. "This one got lucky. Nice spot near the cook-pot's ready for him." He gestures with a lazy hand to a pillar in the corner of the chamber, where there is indeed a chain and padlock ready to take the manacle behind my back. The chef returns to blasting the fire's embers into life with a wheezy pair of bellows. He mutters to himself while my jailers pinion me against the wall, where I sit, straight-backed, condemned to sleep upright for 10 days if I can. "Nice and warm in the winter, mind, though the cooking smells drive some half mad," offers the chef a little later, That's what happened to him whose place you've taken, him that just went off the pulpit. I think of the terrified old man cartwheeling down into the waves, then the terrible crack as he hit a submerged skerry. A mercifully quick end, I suppose, accompanied by a frenzy of seabirds. I heard but did not see his demise, but the sound of it was horror enough. The aged chef is soon stirring a pot of broth over a roaring fire, and I'm wishing I could tear off my linen shirt and cool down. I'd ask for assistance, but that'd only reveal more of my accursed red chest hair, which might anger my gruff companion. Against my will, my appetite is aroused by the cooking smells. The chef, now blind to my presence, ladles warm broth over a rack of slow-cooking birds. I wonder who this food is for. Presumably not the prisoners. I'd ask the kneeling baster, but I doubt I'd receive a helpful response. It doesn't really matter. If I can't get out of here within 10 days, I'll be hurtling over the pulpit myself. Perhaps getting thinner will allow me to slip out of these manacles. Something skitters into the room, something big and shaggy with a lolling, dripping tongue, a huge deerhound running to lap at the juices which have run across the floor from the chef's ladle. The canine floor licker receives only a smack in his rump for his impetuousness. As he passes me, I make sure to brush my hand gently over the deerhound's side, possibly the first tender touch the animal has ever received. The chef is my only human companion over the next week, and he seldom says anything that isn't callous or mocking. He carries with him only his ingredients, his tools, a scruffy cushion to kneel upon, and a wooden box of herbs and spices. He always wears the same shapeless, malodorous smock, covering his girth from neck to ankle. Once a day I'm brought my ration of dark, bitter bread and watery gruel by equally loquacious guards. It's as if everyone has taken a vow of silence. I sometimes call out to other prisoners, but we are evidently spaced out in this labyrinthine jail, so that our voices cannot carry. Sometimes I strain to hear vague cries of despair, and at other times there's a deep sobbing somewhere. It resembles a river gurgling into a sinkhole. My only true friend is the deerhound, whom I name Slobber because of his dribbling jaws. He always appears hungry, although too wary to come close. When he's been fed scraps or given a juicy bone, Slobber likes nothing so much as to lie on the flagstones examining me with his old man's eyes, half hidden under dark tufts of fur that resemble eyebrows. Slobber tilts his head to one side as if trying to understand me. He can probably smell what I'm concealing, too. I've saved some of my bread, squirreling it away under my buttocks, which are now aching from constant contact with the cold, hard floor. "Here, boy, here, Slobber," I say gently, after we are left alone on the 8th afternoon. I've been using my fingers to probe the manacles and padlock behind my back, and I reckon I can pick the lock if I can obtain a pin around 3/4 of an inch long. Fortunately, yesterday I spotted something that might suffice. I now plan to make it my own. I lean to one side, letting Slobber smell the dark musk of the bread, soaked and dripping, as I push it out from under me. After an initial moment of wariness, he creeps forward, sniffing along the flagstones until he identifies the source of the tasty reek. Moving suddenly, Slobber leaps forward and snatches the bread. In the same moment, I grab at his collar, which hangs a little loose. Slobber howls and snarls and is forced to pull himself free, letting the collar slip over his head. Fortunately, he shows restraint and doesn't bite me. Balefully, Slobber now regards me with confused mistrust, turning his back in the opposite corner to gulp down the husk of bread. Meanwhile, I work my fingers behind my back, turning the collar to find the buckle. I can hear footsteps approaching, familiar, dragging, heavy footsteps. I keep my body stiff and upright, moving only my hands behind my back, as the chef stumbles in, bleary-eyed from his afternoon nap. "What's all this tumult?" he says, aiming a kick at Slobber, who howls and jumps to his feet, snarling, hackles raised. I've never seen him so defiant. Fortunately, he's swallowed the last of the bread. "Don't you be snarling at me," the chef mutters, backing away and unrolling a set of cooking knives. He has a bag of something over one shoulder, probably a joint for the evening meal. He hangs this on a high hook, out of range of the dog, and turns to face me. "You've been teaching him bad manners, pretender scum." He's holding a long paring knife, and for a moment I wonder if he means to stab me or cut off an ear. I ignore him and look down at my knees as if penitent. In reality, I'm concentrating. I've managed to locate the pin of the unbuckled collar and insert it into the padlock. Now I'm working at it frantically as I can without moving shoulders or arms. "Wait a minute," says the chef, walking over towards Slobber. "Where's your collar?" He's still holding the knife and makes the mistake of taking his eyes off Slobber's jaws. The hound now knows very well who his favoured master is. Slobber bolts for the chef's wrist, clamping a hand over the arm holding the knife. Simultaneously, I get the padlock open and pull my manacled hands away from the wall. I run at the chef, slamming him against the stone. Then, before he can get back to his feet, I turn and loop my still manacled hands around his neck, pulling him onto my back and leaning forward. The chef is a heavy man, but he's far from tall, and I lift him off his feet with ease. He dangles, choking, grasping at the chain crushing his throat. This stage is vital. I know it will take him at least a minute to lose consciousness, and he's making a horrible gasping sound. I worry that the guards will hear and come for me. Slobber is prowling in confused circles, as if his allegiances are conflicted as I murder his tormentor. I feel a pang of conscience. Although by all accounts a very unpleasant old fellow, the chef is merely a functionary in this prison, an employee of a brutal regime. Does he deserve to die? Nevertheless, if it must be my life versus his, I have at least 50 good years to look forward to, if I can escape this depraved place, whereas the chef is in the winter of his days. Moments later I relax, dropping the chef's corpse onto the flagstones and falling back onto him. It takes me a moment to catch my breath, extricate myself from the chef's body and pull my arms under my legs so that I can at last have my hands before me. The manacles were soldered shut, and I won't be able to open their links with the paltry tools to hand. I must get out of here nonetheless, and fast. I kneel and reach out to Slobber, calming him. He stops panting frantically and sits on his haunches as I formulate a plan. With the chef's keys, outfit, and some mimicry, I might be able to storm past the guardroom. However, there's one major problem: my long, radiantly red hair. I could smear it with ash from the fire, except that's been cleared. The swept clean hearth is awaiting fresh fuel. I know what must be done, but it will take a strong stomach. I find the paring knife from where it has fallen and set to work. Slobber helps me by licking up the blood, as I struggle not to retch up the watery gruel lining my stomach. A few minutes later, I let Slobber lick the inside of the scalp I've removed from the chef. It holds together remarkably well, and is thick, grey, and long. Once clean of blood, it resembles a hand-woven wig. I don the chef's smock, pull my hair back and tuck it into the collar, then pull the grisly artifact down over my own hair. It remains in place nicely, so long as I don't tilt my head too much. I stuff my own rags in the sack containing 3 chickens under the smock to create a fake belly. My hands remain manacled but hidden under the stiff linen. The chain between my feet is held from the ground with a cord ripped from the chef's bag and tied to my waistband. The chain will require me to take small, quick steps, but that's how the chef habitually shuffles anyway. His smock reaches the ground, fortunately. I'll just have to hope that any chain jingling is taken for the keys. I've opened the front of the smock just enough to get my hands out when I need them, and I've tucked the garment's arms inside out so that they don't dangle. It's an imperfect disguise, but might pass muster, moving at speed. Disguised as fully as possible, I march, head down, bent over, grumbling under my breath, towards freedom. I receive only a couple of grunts from the 3 men who slouch or snore at the guard post. Then, 2 locked doors later, I'm back on Angel's Drop, beside the pulpit whose promontory begins just beyond the prison entrance. My timing has been fortunate up until this moment. Now, unfortunately, my luck runs out. A new cohort of guards has come to replace the sleepy crew I passed inside. They are marching up the last few steps before me. I lower my head and walk a little way along the promontory, crouching and pretending to pick some dandelion leaves. "Who goes there?" one shouts. I elect not to answer. Hopefully they'll see the robe and take me for the man I'm impersonating. I hear steps approaching at speed and feel an arm on my shoulder. I'm wrenched around and the flesh wig slips from my head. My natural hair is unmistakable, even here in the late afternoon gloaming. I back away as the guard draws the scimitar. "Looks like we'll be having an unscheduled Angel's Leap today, boys." There's grim laughter as 6 of them come for me. I throw off the robe and they can see my hands manacled before me. I swing at the one with the scimitar, earning only a flesh wound to my forearm. Soon I'm backed right to the edge of the rock. The men hesitate. "Shouldn't we call for His Eminence?" one asks. "I mean, this one's..." I don't hear the rest of his sentence because I've jumped. I've been practicing for this day for years, knowing it might come. I leapt from the chalk cliffs of the southern coast throughout my boyhood, adolescence and 20s. I learned how to spot rocks under the surface from the way the waves move upon them. I know how to twist an arc in the air to perfect my dive, how to tuck in my chin and stretch out my arms above my head. I've also learned how to swim dolphin-like with my hands before me, kicking with my feet, remaining under the water to avoid rocks and arrows. I can hold my breath for minutes on end, and I can open my eyes underwater, no matter how salty the tide. There's a rowboat waiting for me, or should be, at the neighbouring cove. As I drop like a cormorant angling for a silver fish, I have every chance of surviving. Alternatively, I might die in the next moment, as my angel's drop extends and stretches beneath me like molten caramel. For now, however, I am as in control of my destiny as I have ever been, and that, in this dark and dismal age, is all the freedom I've ever asked for. I thank you. Yeah, so that was a fun one. Those were challenging words that I came up with a few days ago, especially baster and liquor. Two very unusual words that were quite tough to work into a present-day narrative, but kind of worked as archaicisms. If that's a word? Is that a word? That should be a word. I declare it a word. Anyway, yeah, hope you enjoyed that little fantasy mini epic, and if you did, you know what to do. Subscribe, hit the like button, leave a comment, and possibly share the channel, or at least this video, with your friends. And I will be back with another how-to video or another story, and very soon, hopefully a guest. Very soon. I think I've said that twice. Never mind, you know what I mean. I'll see you again soon. Bye.